Welcome to day 3 of Stormwater Awareness Week, and this has been a great event already. We've had 2 full days of training, and they're all online now. In fact, if you want to know where the recordings are, let me bring it up. I'll show you on the screen. You can go to the Stormwater Awareness Week website and just on the menu, just find recorded workshops, and there they are. If it's got a red arrow, that means we've uploaded it. And I think we're all caught up through yesterday. So if you missed any of the workshops, then definitely go back and take a look at some of these at your leisure as you can. And also something fun to do. The theme of this year's event is the Voices of Stormwater, and we've been having some fun with this. So if you would like to record your voice of stormwater, and we've had some great creativity. You got to see the David Franklin one. My buddy David Franklin, true to form, you got to watch it. We won't show it right now, but it's this one right here, blurred. And then, of course, one of my favorites is the storm drain that's talking. You got to check that out. But if you want to record your own, just go to the front page of our website, and down here you can share your voice, and we would love to have you do that. It's just been kind of fun doing that. So that's where you can find the recorded workshops. And then today we got a great lineup of workshops. In fact, a lot of them are on the new construction general permit today. So this is part 3 of a 5-part series that we're doing on the new permit. And today we're going to be talking about monitoring programs and about the monitoring that's required under the new permit. Then at 10 o'clock, you will not want to miss this. I am hosting a keynote session with the State Water Board, and 4 different regional water quality control boards are going to be attending. And we're going to be talking about what I consider to be the most troublesome, at least for me, portion of the construction general permit, and that's attachment J, the dewatering. And we'll get into some details on that at 10 o'clock. In fact, I am really interested to see what they're going to say. I don't know what they're going to say. We're going to field them some pretty tough questions as far as who needs a permit, another NPDES permit, when does that need it? And the answers will probably vary regional board to regional board. So you won't want to miss that. And if you can't watch it live, and the benefit of watching it live is you're going to be able to field questions to them. But if you can't watch it live, then definitely watch it recorded. And then later on today, we have the fundamentals of stormwater treatment. That is actually, I think, being put on by Contact. I think this is their first year in participating in Stormwater Awareness Week, a great organization that makes stormwater treatment devices. And then my buddy Chris Brown, I don't know if he's on right now, but he's going to also present on the new construction general permit. He's got a tough assignment. He's doing it all in 1 hour. So that's going to be tough. I take 6 hours to do it, and I'm still stretching it. And then Bob Schultz with Barracks is going to talk about the Caltrans world, the water pollution control management or manager position and training that goes with that. But he's also going to talk about how this new 2022 permit affects the Caltrans world. And then a great one at the end of the day is Kat Van Dusen. And she's going to be talking about a concept called phytoremediation, and about how you can use plants in low impact development situations like bioretention to uptake forever chemicals, PFAS and PCBs and metals and other things like that. So you'll definitely want to watch that. Last year she did it, and it was amazing. So anyways, a little bit about what's going on today, and hopefully you can join for some of that. For this presentation, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll try to take them as we go, and then at the end, we'll try to address any questions. So let's move into it. As I said, this is part 3 of a 5-part series, and today we're going to talk about something very interesting, new monitoring. And here's some of my credentials. You've seen these before if you've attended these. So I'm a QSB, QSD, CPESC, and a trainer record with the CASCA QSB, QSD training program. And then, as we've been mentioning, this is not the official CGP reissuance training. That's a whole separate thing. If you want more information about that, then you need to go to the CASCA website, and they'll provide some detail and links on how to sign up for that reissuance review training. All right, so as we've been mentioning, this training, though, is unofficial, and we're going to provide some commentary about the different aspects of the permit. And so we've been saying that this material is brand new. It hasn't been put into practice for very long, maybe 3 weeks. And so I don't think any of us are experts at this yet. And we're having to do this new and untested compliance program. And so our interpretation is going to be rather subjective. We're going to just kind of need to get the feel of it as we move forward and figure out how we're going to make the things in the permit work, especially the monitoring program. And that's what we're going to focus on this morning. Now, I had mentioned previously that in some ways, nothing changed with the monitoring program. And I'll illustrate that to you in a moment. But in other ways, everything changed. And the reason is because of this that you see on the screen, a change in the definition of a qualifying precipitation event. In fact, we kind of changed the term too, right? It used to be in the old permit called a qualifying rain event. Now it's called a qualifying precipitation event. I guess we saw last year that California can indeed get snow. So it's now called a qualifying precipitation event. And in the 2009 order, you probably were real familiar with how to figure it out, right? You went out to the rain gauge, and if there was a ½ inch or more, then you had a qualifying event. Now, it wasn't in a single day. It was during a stretch of rainy weather that ended with 48 hours of dry weather. So whether it's 1 day or whether it's 30 days, until we get 48 hours of dry weather, the rain event doesn't end. And then we measure the accumulation of rain, and once it gets, or if it gets above 0.5, then it's a qualifying event. Now, that's not when the qualifying event begins. The qualifying event was the whole thing. So you're having to anticipate a little bit, and you were having to look at some weather data to kind of take a best guess. Do you think it's going to be qualifying? And if it was qualifying, then you needed to be sampling each day of that event. And we'll see. I'm actually going to put the two permits side by side, and we'll work through some scenarios to see how that would play out. Now, let's look at the 2022 definition of a qualifying precipitation event. It is any pattern that is forecast. Check that word out, forecast, to have a 50% or greater probability of precipitation, also known as a POP, and a quantitative precipitation forecast, QPF, of 0.5 inches or more within a 24-hour period. The event begins with a 24-hour period when 0.5 inches has been forecast and continues on subsequent 24-hour periods when 0.25 inches of precipitation or more is forecast. Look at the difference here. You know, I tell everybody there was only one real big loser in this new permit, and that was the rain gauge. The rain gauge got a serious demotion in this permit. It didn't lose its job altogether. We'll see that it still had some things to do, but it seriously got demoted in this permit, meaning that it's no longer needed to determine a rain event. A rain event is only determined by the forecast. So if you stop and think about this, and especially as you think about this longer and longer, it gets a little bit weird, a little bit strange. So now, when we're looking at a qualifying precipitation event, what's no longer relevant? How much rain fell, right? That's no longer relevant of how much rain actually falls. It's all forecast driven. Well, let's move forward. When we started to teach on this permit and look at this permit, it was last December, and I actually took a real storm event that was passing through the Central California, Northern California area, and using the weather.gov forecasting tool, we took a look at this and we did this for a side-by-side comparison. So let's take a look at this weather event. In fact, what I'm going to do is blow it up on your screen so you can see a little more of the detail. And so here you can see it's December 1st, 2022 is when this event was moving through. And we had right here in the brown line, the probability of precipitation. And it gets a little crowded up here, but it reaches 93%. And then down here in these green bars, you can see the quantitative precipitation forecast or amount that's being forecasted. And you can see in a 24-hour period, roughly 5 a.m. to roughly 5 a.m., we're expected to get 0.75 inches. So under the new construction general permit, is that a qualifying rain event? Well, yes, because you're above 50%, we're at 93%, and you're above half an inch in those 24 hours. So under the 2022 permit, yes, this is going to be a qualifying precipitation event. Now, let's compare it to the 09 permit. And just for comparison purposes, let's just assume that the forecaster who forecasted the quantity was absolutely correct, and that what got forecasted there is exactly what we saw in our rain gauge. I know, highly unlikely, but just for argument's sake, let's say that's what we saw in the rain gauge. So would that be a qualifying event under the 09 permit? And the answer is yes again, because we got more than 0.5 inches in a rain event measured in the rain gauge. So for both permits, we're starting off, December 1st is starting off as a qualifying rain event. And so now as we move through, that was Thursday, here's Friday, December 2nd, and what happens? Well, from 5 a.m. to roughly 5 a.m., it's dry. Nothing is forecasted. And again, we're going to assume that's actually what happened. So under the 2022 permit, what happens to our rain event? Well, the following day, the subsequent day, nothing's predicted. Remember, it's all forecast driven. Nothing is predicted. Therefore, and in fact, to be qualifying for the next day, 0.25 inches, if you remember, had to be predicted. So in this case, nothing's predicted. The rain event ends. The rain event ends with a single day for the 2022 permit. But how about the 2009 permit? And remember, there's still a lot of sites that are going to be operating under this 2009 permit for the next 2 years until August 31st, 2025, or until they end, whichever comes first. So for the 09 permit, what terminated a rain event, according to that definition, was 48 hours of dry weather. Well, we haven't gotten that, right? We've got 24 hours of dry weather, but look at what happens on Saturday. In fact, I'll drag this over and we'll take a look. There's another little system moving through. And on Saturday, again, we're going to assume that the rain gauge or the prediction is exactly what they got in the rain gauge. But it's predicted for the first 24 hours that there's going to be 0.57 inches of rain for the first 24 hours. And the percentage is, again, above 50%. So under the 2022 permit, QPE number 2 has started. So we are in a second qualifying precipitation event. Under the 09 permit, we are still in it. It never ended. It never ended. We didn't get 48 hours of dry weather, and it's continuing. And so what happens is here we got, that was Saturday, and then Sunday, we see, well, about 0.22 here, 0.10 there. Well, that puts us above a 1/4 inch, right, of predicted rainfall. So we're going to have a 2-day qualifying precipitation event under the 2022 permit. And then comes Monday and the rain falls off. I don't show the rest of the graph here, but we're just going to assume the next several days are dry. And so that ends at finally for the 2009 permit, because we finally got 48 hours of dry weather. And because there's not 50% probability, or there's not 0.25 inches predicted of rain for Monday, then the event ended under the 2022 permit in the early morning hours of Monday, December 5th. So that is a look at the qualifying precipitation event under the 2 permits. So 2009 basically stretched from December 1st to December 7th. And then under the 2022 permit, we had 2 separate events, one on December 1st and one on December 3rd and 4th, 2 events. So we'll take a look. We're going to use the same storm to look at how inspections would work, and also how monitoring sampling will work. So let's move forward. All right, so now here's table 2 out of attachment D of the 2022 construction general permit. And if you look at table D and you compare it to a very similar table in attachment D for risk level 2, or attachment C or E for risk levels 1 and 3 in the 2009 permit, you'll notice that this table is almost identical. Almost identical. We still have weeklies, we still have pre-storms, during storms, and post-storms are still required. In fact, there's only one big difference, and that's what is not on the table in attachment D of the new permit, and that's quarterly non-stormwater inspections. Those dropped off. They're not at least identified separately. They still need to be a part of your weeklies. You still need to look for non-stormwater discharges, but there isn't a separate inspection for quarterly non-stormwater inspections. So this is exactly what I mean. In some ways, nothing changed. We got the same inspections that are needed. Same inspections by definition, same inspections. But in other ways, everything changed. So let's go through this a little bit of detail here. So we still have the baseline inspections, and those are weeklies, and weeklies are weeklies. They really haven't changed. Pre-storm, so let's take a look at this. This did change. So under the 09 permit says you have to do a pre-storm within 2 business days prior to each qualifying event, with a rain event action plan required for risk level 2 and 3 projects. Okay, and that rain event action plan actually provided some definition as far as how we approached these pre-storms, because the pre-storm was really kind of needed. It was the intel needed to be able to actually fill out a rain event action plan. And so the rain event action plan had to be prepared 48 hours before the rain event. It had to be physically in place in the contractor's hands 24 hours before the rain event. That way they have their punch list and they have time to address their punch list before the rain event comes in. So that rain event action plan helped define when a pre-storm should be done. Now let's look at the new definition of a pre-storm under the 2022 permit. It says within 72 hours or 120 hours if an extended forecast is available. And I'm not even quite sure why they put that parentheses in there, because it is, as far as I can tell, always available. But you are allowed up to 120 hours before the event, prior to any weather pattern that is forecast to have a 50% or greater chance of 0.5 inches or more in a 24-hour period. All right, there's a lot we can say about this. And so I'm going to try to avoid some of the weeds. First, I'm going to mention that definition you see right there is slightly different than a QPE. In the reissuance training that you will take, they do a great job of identifying what I call the 4 storm events of the permit. There's 4 types of storm events identified in the permit. This definition is actually what's called a forecasted rain event, not a qualifying precipitation event. However, they make it clear that if the context is that it is a qualifying precipitation event, that is what the permit means. It's unfortunate that some of that language didn't get cleaned up, and it does cause some confusion. We did have we did a monthly DIRT article, I think last month, on the 4 qualifying precipitation events. And so we provide a little bit more detail on that. And you'll also see that, like I said, in your reissuance review. But this is a qualifying precipitation event. It is, both forecast to have 50% or greater probability and having 0.5 inches of rain or more forecasted. So the water board's made it clear. Consider this a qualifying precipitation event definition. Now, here's the first word, within. Within. What does within mean? Somebody unmute yourself. Tell me, what's within mean? Who wants to be brave? Tell me what within means.
If it happens within that 96 hours.
Or 72 hours or 120 hours. Yeah, within, right? Anytime, right? In fact, growing up, I not only was into baseball, but rockets, the whole Apollo program and space shuttle program was in their heyday when I was a kid. And, we got real familiar with the countdowns, right? What kid wasn't doing 10, 9, 8, 7, or if you really were into the NASA lingo, T minus 24, T minus 16, T minus. So I kind of take that language and I apply it to this now. QPE minus 24, QPE minus 48, QPE minus 72. Anything QPE minus is within, right? Is within. Now, here's the deal with doing these pre-storms. It's forecast driven. Somebody tell me what happens to forecast. Somebody tell me, unmute yourself. What happens to forecast?
They change.
They change. They change. They can become more greater percentage, greater volume, or they can fall completely off the radar. They change. In fact, they can go back and forth. I've seen it. I've been a storm chaser for 30 years. I've seen it. They can go, oh, it's qualifying. We're going to go. Oh, no, it's not qualifying. We're not going. Oh, now it's qualifying. We're going to go. No, it's not. I've seen it go back and forth. And many times, many events, 12 hours out, 6 hours out, all of a sudden now it's 90%. It's been 30% for 4 days. Now it's 90%, 6 hours. So that is creating a dilemma for us who are having to decide this. And really what you do with the pre-storm really defines the rain event. What you do, the pre-storm defines the rain event. It defines whether it's going to be qualifying and whether you're going to be doing durings and post. Well, we'll see post is slightly different, but during certainly. It really defines it. Now, in listening to the State Water Board's road shows and some of their workshops they've given, they have taken the approach of what I call the philosophical approach. They have basically said, what's the purpose of a pre-storm? Well, it's to get ready for the rain event, right? The pre-storm is, all right, we might get some rain, so what do we need to do at this site? And they've pretty much taken that approach, and they say, as long as, you look at the weather, you look at the forecast, and you make your best call. Now, when we first started talking with the water board, about this, a year ago or so, maybe last Stormwater Awareness Week, there was still some, they were looking at within, and, I said, Brandon, I was talking to Brandon Rosenboom, actually, and I said, is this something where we treat it like the REAP? And so we look at the weather.gov site, and if it says it's not going to qualify, I then print out my paper report and my forecast, and that's my documentation, and then I just go with that. He goes, no, you're going to be responsible for this until, all the way up until the rain starts. If it changes, then you're going to need change. Well, they've backed off of that. And now pretty much what they're advocating is, yes, do your best, print out the forecast, and go with it. If it says it's not qualifying, then I guess you don't need to do it. If it's indicating it's going to be qualifying, then you're going to need to do a pre-storm. So that's what I call the philosophical approach to it. And that resonates with me. I get it. It makes a lot of sense. It helps. It certainly helps kind of streamline things a little bit. But there's some other problems. First off, are there entities out there that are concerned about compliance and about dotting every I and crossing every T? Are there entities out there that are actually watching our compliance programs and are also watching the forecast? And I assure you there are. There are NGOs out there who are mining smarts, who are mining the data and watching for non-compliance. And so there is also the part of me as a consultant who's concerned about compliance and going, okay, I get it that the water board's not going to enforce on if it really did become qualifying after I determined it wasn't qualifying, they're not going to enforce on that. That's good. But these other NGOs, no, I don't think they're going to be as merciful. I think they're going to, go, no, here's the printout. It was qualifying and you didn't do it. So there is that concern. So I call that the compliance concern or the compliance approach. So the water board's taking the philosophical approach. I know there's going to be entities out there that are going to hold us to the compliance approach. Then there's another approach that that we're concerned about, and that's the logistical approach. Now, I don't know if we got a lot of people online right now, but my friend Robin Tolley at the Tolley Consulting Group, she's got a big group of QSPs. I think 2 or 3 dozen QSPs that she has to send out to, who knows how many sites. I'm thinking well over 100 sites they're having to cover. So can you imagine, she's looking at an event that's coming in that's predicted for Monday. It's coming Monday. This is Friday afternoon. She's doing her best job to come up with, okay, do we go, do we not go? And so maybe Monday afternoon at 4 p.m., she finally says, yeah, I think it's going to be qualifying. I think it's going to be qualifying. She prints out her report showing it's above 50%. It's above half an inch predicted. And she goes, yeah, it's going to be qualifying. Then, the weekend happens and Monday morning, the last thing I think she wants is to have about a half a dozen of her employees come in with their own printouts and going, hey, guess what, boss? It's no longer qualifying. We don't need to go. Well, that's what I call the logistical approach. What's she going to say? She's going to say, shut up and get out there. So you have this logistics of like having to dispatch QSPs to do it. And you can't have this loosey-goosey back and forth. Is it qualifying? Is it not qualifying? And second guessing and all of that. So that's what I call the logistical approach or concern. And then there's one other concern that I have when it comes to these pre-storms is what I call the business concern. And this may be one of my biggest concerns actually, is so let's say on Friday, we actually do make our call and say, yeah, we're going to dispatch. We're going to dispatch. It looks like it's going to be qualifying on Monday morning. We're going to send people out. Send them out. They do it. Do you think there'll be a few savvy contractors who are also watching the weather? You think that might happen? That there might be a few savvy contractors? And on Monday morning, guess what? It's no longer 60%, it's now 40% probability. And they print out their report. So we do the inspection, we submit our invoice, and they go, we're not going to pay for that. You didn't have to do it. It wasn't qualifying. You think that could happen? Well, that's a concern too. And that's what I call the business concern or the business approach. So we have these 4 different considerations when it comes to doing these pre-storms and how to balance that. So, you know, this forecast-driven pre-storm is definitely going to give some challenges here that we're having to balance these 4 approaches. So what's that mean? Probably means I'm going to write my contracts a little bit different, you know, to make sure I don't get, you know, a contractor saying, no, I'm not going to pay for that. It probably means we're going to be having to adjust our logistics a bit. It probably means we're going to have to give some consideration to compliance. And of course, you know, the pre-storm, the purpose of the pre-storm and the philosophical approach is certainly important too. So yeah, all of that is loaded into this pre-storm definition and gives you a lot to think about. Okay, but once the pre-storm starts, now we have during storms to do. And every 24-hour period for each subsequent day forecast to have 0.25 inches of precipitation is what's happening under the 2022 order. Of course, under the old order, it started with the rain actually falling and us making some sort of judgment call. Do we think it's going to get above ½ inch or not? If we think it could, then we're probably out there every day doing the during storms. But under the new one, it's all forecast driven. And again, what is not relevant? Well, how much rain actually fell? It's not relevant any longer. Now let's look at post-storms. Post-storms under the 09 permit was you were doing these inspections within 2 business days prior to each qualifying rain event. So remember, the rain event doesn't end until you get 2 days of dry weather. And then you got 2 more days to do your post-storms. Now, I know a lot of us QSPs and QSDs, we kind of cheated the window there, right? Yeah, you know, maybe we didn't wait a full 2 days before, you know, it stopped raining. The next 24 hours, 48 hours, we're out there doing a post-storm. Technically, you're supposed to do it, you know, 48 hours after that, or within 48 hours after that. The new permit says within 96 hours after each qualifying event, if 0.5 inches or more of precipitation is measured during the duration of the QPE in the rain gauge. So the rain gauge didn't lose their job after all, just a serious demotion. It still will be used to determine whether a post-storm inspection is needed or not. And the other job the rain gauge has is just FYI. It's one of the items that's required in the inspection checklist. You are to record the volume in the rain gauge. It's just basically FYI. All right, let's go to our storm event and take a look at these, how this works out. So we showed you the 2 series of weather patterns coming through. And under the 09, remember, the event started here with the first rainfall falling. Now we have pre-storms to do, and again, I'll blow this up so we can look at this a little closer. So we could do our pre-storm event under the 09 permit as early as November 29th. And 48 hours before the event, it's coinciding with the REAP probably. And so, and then pre-storms and weeklies, you know, can be combined and it's one inspection meeting both the requirements. That is also true of the 2022 permit. But we could, in this case, do it as early as November 26th. But should we? Well, I don't know. So as we move towards the event, then our during happens here. Our during happens here. So the rain's falling, and we're doing it during because under 2022, it's the forecast goals have been met. But this during here can also, and probably will also, double as a pre for the next event we're keeping our eye on. But under the 09 permit, we're doing a during each day here. And so there's a during even in this 24-hour break. Now, here comes the weekend. Now, for the weekend, chances are very good that that's going to be exempt under both permits, and we'll see the exemptions allowed under the new permit. But during non-business hours, you do not need to do inspections or monitoring. And so if you're a Monday through Friday operation, then very possibly it's going to be exempt on Saturday and Sunday. You're not going to need to do durings. Now, if you're a 7-day-a-week operation, then yes, you're going to have to do durings under both permits during Saturday and Sunday. And then after the weekend, well, we'll keep doing durings technically until December 7th under the 09 permit. And then by December 9th, we need to do our post-storm event. Now, under the new permit, we do our during only on Sunday, and that's assuming we're a 7-day-a-week operation. And then we do our post by December 9th as well. Notice same date, actually. But the hours that were allowed are different for that. So so if I zoom out here, you will notice which permit has less inspections. And if you count up the arrows, you go, oh, 2022 has less inspections. Well, that might be one indication that, oh, maybe the new permit's a little less expensive. No, probably not. And the reason is because of yesterday. Remember who else is having to go out in the field? Is the QSD. They also need to be out there. So some savings inspections here. You're going to see some new additional ones you didn't have before. So, all right, let's take a look at LUPs. LUP inspections change, and I applaud this change. This is a great change. The 2009 permit said, look, you know, you got to do them dailies for LUPs for all types. But then it had this strange clause in, but you don't have to document it. And I don't know who doesn't document an inspection, but it said you didn't have to. Now they've switched all that to, it mirrors the traditionals. It's identical to the traditionals. And I think that was a great change, actually. So don't have to remember two different monitoring programs for LUPs and traditionals. Sampling requirements. Well, here's another example that nothing changed. Nothing changed. This is exactly what we would have saw in the 09 permit. But is it? Well, let's take a look at this. Frequency. Well, that didn't change. Risk level 1s still don't have to do them. Risk level 2s and 3s do every day during a QPE. But we've noticed that QPEs are different. What gets sampled? So under the 09 permit, it says stormwater and non-stormwater. And strangely enough, under the 2022 permit, it only says stormwater. And I've checked and rechecked and double-checked this. Strangely enough. Was that intentional? I don't know. Maybe it's because of attachment J. I don't know. But it only says stormwater. Make your own conclusion there. Number and locations, I should say. Under the 09 permit, says risk level 2 and 3 discharge shall collect effluent samples at all discharge points where stormwater is discharged off-site. A minimum of 3 samples are to be collected per day from the entire site. Under the 2022 permit, it says 1 sample from each discharge location per 24-hour period of each QPE during active discharge. Samples are to be collected from all discharge locations incorporating runoff from the project construction sites. So if we had 1 discharge point under the 09 permit, that had to be sampled 3 times. Under the 2022 permit, it has to be sampled once. If we have two discharge points under the 09 permit, one of them is sampled once and the other sampled twice. Under the 2022 permit, each one is sampled once. And if we have 3 discharge points or more, under the 09 permit, each one is sampled once. Under the 2022 permit, each one is sampled once. So a little bit of a change there. The NALs did not change, at least as far as numbers are concerned. pH is still 6.5 and 8.5, and turbidity is still 250. On Friday, we'll talk about TMDLs, so we'll kind of just skip over that for right now. But a big change, a significant change in this permit is how NALs are determined, or NAL exceedances are determined, I should say. So when the site-wide, under the 09 permit, when the site-wide daily average of all samples and discharge locations exceed the applicable NAL, that is when it is exceeded. But under the 2022 permit, it applies to each discharge location on its own merits. Let's take a look at an example. Right over here. So here's a very typical sampling results, very typical, 5 discharge points. And under the 09 permit, you know, we look at it, okay, number 1 is 7.8, 35, really good numbers, really good numbers. Number 2 is 7.9 for pH and 125 for turbidity, good numbers. Number 3, a bit high, 8.8, 275. Very realistic numbers. That's not horrible, a bit high. Okay. Number 4, very decent again, 7.2 and 65. And number 5, 8.6 and 325. Again, a bit high. It's not horrible, but a bit high. But if we average all those up under the 09 permit, it's an average of 8.06 for pH and an average of 165 for turbidity. Both within or under their NALs, very acceptable numbers. This would be a good data set. We would go, this site is performing well. This site is performing well. Maybe we could throw some extra BMPs at number 3 and number 5, but they're doing well. Under the new permit, though, we had an exceedance there, an exceedance there, an exceedance there, and an exceedance there. We went from 0 NAL exceedances to now 4 NAL exceedances. So what's that mean? Well, guess who's going into the field? If you were with us yesterday, you know. 2 people, QSD and the QSP. Both are going out into the field within 14 calendar days of this exceedance. So do you think we'll have more NAL exceedances? Yeah, I think we will. I think we will. And I think that QSD better get a pair of not just work boots, but maybe some rubber boots. They're going to be going into the field quite a bit. So yeah, we got that happening. All right, let's look at sampling now, same storm event, and when we need to sample. So you're familiar enough now with the weather pattern going through, and under the 09 permit, we need to sample every day there is a discharge. So one of the rules is if there's no discharge, you don't sample, right? And that's still true. But we need to be out there and ready to sample every day during the qualifying rain event. And so for this particular example, that's going to be at least Thursday and Friday. Saturday and Sunday may be exempt. And then possibly Monday or Tuesday if there's a lingering discharge, depending on the characteristics of your site. So but under the 2022 permit, you are going to be sampling the first day and on that first storm event on Thursday. And then if you're a 7-day-a-week event, then you may be sampling on Saturday and Sunday, but not on any of the other days. Again, remember what's not relevant in this is whether it's raining or not. It's all forecast driven. So whether it's raining or not, there may be nothing to sample. But that's not too different than what we see now. because lots of times, even though it's technically a sampling day, you're not required to sample outside of business hours. The rain events often come in at night or after 3:30 in the afternoon when the project is over. There's many times, in a typical pattern like this with, 5 potential sample days under the 09 permit, we might get 1 or 2 out of that whole time where we can actually get a sample. So I don't know if we're going to see any real difference in the number of samples being collected. We'll have to just see how that works out. LUPs, it hasn't changed. It's the same as it was before. Run-on sampling, slight wording change. It changed it from shall for traditionals to may, the words may. Now, I will say, if you do have run-on happening and it's causing NAL exceedances, not only may you sample, you should sample it. You should, if the neighboring property is causing you to exceed NALs for turbidity, you definitely want to sample that. So receiving water sampling really didn't change a whole lot, cleaned up the language and the formatting a little bit, but it really didn't change a whole lot. Now, non-visible pollutant sampling, that changed. That changed a bit. And so I used to teach in my classes 2 and 2. Remember 2 and 2, that you got to collect non-visible sample within 2 hours of the discharge at 2 locations. I guess I got to change my teaching technique to now 1/8. Remember 1/8. I like to give my students memory hooks. Why 1/8? Well, you only need 1 sample now, and now you got 8 hours to collect it in. Is what it used to be, or what it is now. Now, there are some really good things about what the Water Board did with this. So first off, non-visible pollutant sampling is the oldest of all requirements. It actually even predates the 2009 permit. It was in the previous permit before that. It's been around for a long time, and I think it's here to stay. Under Roman numeral 3D, 3B, it says dischargers are required to conduct sampling for it and analysis for non-visible pollutants identified in the SWIP or otherwise known to be on site only when the pollutants may be discharged due to a failure to implement BMPs, a container spill or leak, or BMP breach, failure, or malfunction. So it's really important to remember the trigger for that. And then it says you have to collect it within 8 hours of a discharge at the down gradient discharge point from that that upset, whatever happened, porta potty blowing over. And then it says, this is new, and in D3D, it says dischargers shall continue to collect at least 1 sample per applicable discharge location for each 24-hour period that there is a discharge until necessary corrective actions are completed to control further discharge of the pollutant. This is great. This is an off-ramp. Now, that was always kind of understood. Really, the industry kind of worked itself out to do this anyways, but it wasn't stated as such in the previous permit. So I do applaud that we're putting in some good definition into this permit that will help us really know when and when not to do non-visible sampling. The next one also I applaud as a good addition. Dischargers are not required to sample if one of the conditions described in above, as a breach, spill, etc., occurs, and prior to discharge, the material containing the pollutants fully remediated or removed, and BMPs to control the pollutant are implemented, maintained, or replaced as necessary. And again, this is a great new change because this means maybe not only do we have an off-ramp, but we might not have to get onto the freeway. We might not need to. Now, again, we all kind of got to this understanding using best professional judgment under the previous permit, but it's nice to have it in black and white here and identifying when you need to sample, when you do not need to sample. That is a very good addition to this permit. All right, here are the monitoring exceptions. haven't changed that much. A little bit of more definition on wind, a little different definition or enhanced definition for outside scheduled business hours, says or when the site is not accessible to personnel. And as always, if you claim any of these, you need to document that in your ad hoc report, in your annual report. You need to document that. One other monitoring or kind of a permitting scenario here where monitoring can be reduced is for periods of inactivity. This is also a good new change in the construction general permit, because we were always asked, well, we're having to shut down the site for either because there's maybe endangered species potentially present, snow, whatever. There were various reasons. And now you can do that under the 2022 permit. You do it through the change of information process. It starts with a QSD revising the SWIP to show what is going to be the new configuration of BMPs during this period of inactivity, with photographs of those BMPs installed. And so that you upload that onto SMARTS as a part of COI. And once it's approved, then here's what can happen under Roman numeral 3G2. It says, first off, all sampling may be suspended. All right, so right there, we got some relief. That's cool. And monitoring inspections may be reduced as follows. So G2A says a QSD shall visit the site within 14 days of that approval of the COI. I guess basically to check it out, make sure that the BMPs specified for this period of inactivity have indeed are installed correctly, the site is ready. Then G2B says a QSP or trained delegate shall visually inspect the inactive project at least once every calendar month and prior to any weather pattern that is forecast to have 50% or greater chance of 0.5 inches or more in a 24-hour period. All right, for those of you who are kind of stormwater geeks like me, notice that is a different definition than a QPE. And I do believe that is intentional. I do not interpret that as a QPE inherent task. And that is what we would call a forecast storm. Go to your glossary, look up the difference. There is a subtle difference. If you want more detail, review or watch that portion of the reissuance training. They do cover this. And then we have a newsletter that we actually gave some detail on that. I believe this is legitimately a forecast storm event, different than a QPE. And I'll also say, I think far less likely to be triggered than a QPE. So you have to do this pre-forecast rain event. And then the QSP and trained delegate shall verify the BMPs are functioning as needed. Of course, if it's dangerous conditions like deep snow, ice, etc., you don't have to do it. And then to reverse this whole thing, is go through the COI process again. Amend the SWIP for BMPs now for the active process and get that COI approved on SMARTS. So that is periods of inactivity. All right, and whose job is it? Well, here's a list under the 2009 and 2022 order. We're comparing these. Weeklies can be done by anyone. However, under the 2022, the QSP has to at least do one a month. One a month. Now, that doesn't mean it has to be a weekly. They have to visit the site once a month. It could be for another reason, NAL exceedance, pre-storm, during storm, well, they're going to do pre-storms. So pre-storms, under the 09, that could be anybody. Under the 2022, it's a QSP's job. Now, a QSD may do the job of a QSP. Yesterday, we talked about when that is acceptable and about, being named as the QSP or QSP alternate QSP in the SWIP. So listen to yesterday's broadcast if you missed out about that. But ultimately, it is a QSP's job to do it. A delegated inspector cannot do the pre-storms. Reefs, It's QSP's job under the 2009, and those projects that are still under the 2009 will still be doing reefs until potentially August 31st, 2025. Under 2022, no need to do it. No reefs. They say they went away, but did they? Did they? Pre-storms sound an awful lot like the old reefs, don't they? All right, during storms, it could be any of the players. Same with post-storms, sampling, any of the players. NAL exceedance inspections is going to be the QSP and the QSD. The job start, remember yesterday we covered this, the QSD has got to get out there with the first 30 days. The QSD is also going to visit the site twice a year. And then the NOT inspection, that is the QSP. All right, well, let's take some questions here. And I probably have a few here. So, 20. I don't know if we'll get to them all, but all right. It's going to be, it's going to be very difficult for inspectors to know which inspection program they're under. And one of the key things is to know what permit is this site under. That's going to be really, really tricky. Can the quarterly count towards the weekly as well? Yes, of course. Under the 2009 permit, yes. In fact, the hardest thing about the quarterly was remembering to do it. And so at least for our inspections, we always built the quarterly inspection elements into our weeklies. That way we never forgot it. And it only took a few moments to do it anyways. All right. Let's see, a quarterly is just a visit. Yeah. Let's see. How often are you to check the forecast? And what if a change happens after business hours that day? Well, I think I was kind of addressing that with some of my scenarios, but it's still kind of, we're scratching our heads trying to figure out how are we actually going to balance those four concerns I talked about. Remember, the philosophical, the compliance, the logistical, and the business. How are we going to balance that? That's going to be we're going to have to work that out. Is there a particular website you need to track weather? Absolutely. The website is right here. It's the NOAA website. In fact, I show right here what we're expecting this weekend for that. But if I just go to my homepage here, I have it for Lodi. And so you go to this website, National Weather Service. And then usually I'll go down here. Now, different people use different things. Like they'll use the tabular. The water board likes to point to that a lot more. To me, storms aren't on a table. They're on a bell curve. And so, storms ramp up to an apex and then diminish. And that's how I prefer to look at it from a graphical viewpoint. But that's the website you need to go to. Thank you for the definition of forecasted precipitation event. In fact, I was showing here our podcast series. I am planning to come out with a podcast just on these, what I call the 4 storm events of the new construction general permit. Probably would have made a good Stormwater Awareness Week workshop, huh? All right, where do I go for your 10 a.m. meeting? Oh, just sign up on Stormwater Awareness or week.org. You can sign up for that workshop. So do it right after we end here. We only got another minute here. Let's see. What if the site is a Monday through Saturday? However, the QSP is a Monday through Friday. That's a dilemma. You're going to have to balance business with compliance, and you may need somebody out there on a Saturday occasionally. So that's always a dilemma. So maybe if you don't want to work on a Saturday, word your contracts carefully and your proposals carefully. But the LRP, the legally responsible person, will be on the hook to do it. So kind of consider how you're going to do that. If it is a QPE, would you have to do the Saturday inspection? You would. Oh, somebody's just answering that. Does sampling during rain event mean during work hours? Yes, as defined in the SWIP. So you do need to define it in the SWIP. In fact, that's one of the things that has to go on the title page now of the new SWIPs. under the 2022 permit is the business hours. And how many definitions of discharge are there? Non-visible, dewatering, stormwater. If it's truly a discharge, if it stays on site. Mel, that's an interesting question, and one that Brandon and I were kicking around the other day preparing for the keynote we're going to do today. So you might want to attend that keynote. And he might share what the Water Board's legal group was thinking about that very question. So if he doesn't, maybe you want to ask it and hear what the Water Board has to say about that. So that's an interesting question. I don't have time to go into the weeds there. In fact, it's already past the 9 o'clock hour. So we're going to end this, but thank you for joining us for this workshop. Tomorrow we'll do part 4 and have a good Stormwater Awareness Week day.